Good morning, good afternoon, or evening to you all and to those joining us live and to those listening in afterwards. Welcome to the 20th episode of FIP's digital program on the development goals, setting goals for the decade ahead. Today's episode is about FIP development goal number 14, medicine's expertise. Welcome. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Dalia Dlamini, and I am the lead for provision and partnerships at FIP. And I'm delighted to be moderating this session and introducing the speakers soon. We would like to start with some housekeeping announcements for your convenience. We would like to share that some of these announcements are present on the slide, but they are that this webinar is recorded and live streamed via YouTube. The recording will be available on our website at fip.org. You may ask questions. We invite you to do that using the question box provided. You're also welcome to provide feedback to us at webinars@fip.org. We also would like to take this opportunity, if you are not a member of FIP, to become a member of the Federation, and you can seek more information and support via visiting our website on fip.org/memberships_registration. We would like to begin this episode by briefly introducing you to the digital events program, Setting Goals for the Decade Ahead. Setting Goals for the Decade Ahead is FIP's 2021 digital programs on the FIP development goals. It is a comprehensive online event series which provides coverage of the 21 goals over 21 events in 2021. The main aim of the 21 digital events is to mobilize global pharmacy development and transformation through the development goals. By engaging our profession, members, and colleagues everywhere, we aim to provide a description, direction, and context for each specific goal. Monitoring and evaluating through data, evidence, and identifying priorities across practice, science, workforce, and education is also a part of the program. The 21 events have been running since March this year. As I already mentioned, today's episode is the 20th in this digital program, and it is on medicine's expertise, DG number 14. We would like to also invite you to register for the last event in the series on impact and outcomes, which will take place on the 15th of December, and I will provide with more information on that towards the end of the program. I would like to share with you the event outcomes for today. Number one, to describe the FIP development goals and to explain the components of DG14. Number two, to showcase some FIP tools, evidence, and resources to support DG14 implementation across the three elements. Number three, to identify priorities across practice science, workforce, and education within this particular DG. And number four, to discuss the importance of monitoring and evaluation through data, evidence, and engaging participants such as yourselves with FIP Indicators Development Project. We have with us today three reputable speakers, our colleagues Dr. Sham Moodley, Dr. Josep Gu, and Dr. Hala Fada, who's unable to join us live, but we have a recording from her to share during her segment. I would like to start with mentioning that the FIP development goals were launched in September 2020 as one FIP goals that bring together pharmaceutical practice, science, workforce, and education. And as per FIP's vision and mission, FIP believes that we can have no pharmaceutical care without pharmaceutical workforce, and we can have no pharmaceutical care without a scientific foundation for the next decade. The FIP development goals are 21 goals that build on the 13 workforce development goals that were launched in 2016. FIP used the same consensus-based approach to expand the goals into a set of 21, each reflecting elements of practice, science, workforce, and education. Let's watch together this next short video to see the 21 goals in action. I hope you enjoyed that video, and refocusing on today's episode, it is on development goal 14, medicines expertise. Like each of the development goals, DG14 is composed of 3 elements for practice, science, and workforce and education that all form fundamental categories of the goal, providing a focus for transforming global pharmacy and medicines expertise. I will provide a brief description on how globally we will be able to transform this particular development goal. Globally, we will have strategies and systems in place to prepare and train a workforce that can deliver quality medicines expertise via the mechanisms shared or displayed on your screen, which include ensure academic capacity to deliver education and training, to enhance medicines expertise in initial education, to incorporate expert information and advice provision skills in early career training strategy and continuing professional development strategies, to utilize advanced and specialist development systems and frameworks, including FIP development goal number 4 on workforce, to develop medicines expertise as an advanced or specialist area for the workforce, in addition to being embedded within leadership development programs, FIP development goal number 6, to incorporate medicine expertise, competencies and skills in competency development frameworks for pharmacy. The second element, focusing on practice. Globally, we will have strategies and systems in place on pharmaceutical expert information and advice provision to patients, formal and informal caregivers, healthcare professionals, and relevant agencies and stakeholders via the following mechanisms: providing medicines and medical devices expertise and advice to patients, formal and informal caregivers, healthcare professionals, and relevant agencies and stakeholders to inform policy making, clinical decision making, and prescribing practices, as well as individual healthcare options and other medicines or medical devices related decisions. To empower patients, formal and informal caregivers, and communities by increasing health literacy towards better care and self-care. To utilize appropriate communication and counselling pathways and skills to provide quality and appropriate information, taking into consideration cultural and language factors and other specific care needs. Finally, to utilize formal resources, including formularies and medicines information management systems, to convey objective, evidence-based and systematically organized information about medicines and medical devices to support pharmacy practice and service delivery, as well as the practice of other healthcare professionals. Finally, we will globally also encourage provision of science-based information on medicines. By the following mechanisms, we can promote responsible use of medicines by mobilizing medicines expertise, as well as implement high-value cognitive services to review and optimize medicines use. With that, I have given you an overview of the development goals, but also focused on DG14 elements and mechanisms. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for today's webinar. Dr. Sham Moodley is a community pharmacist in the Durban South Basin area. Sham is a community pharmacy section executive committee member at FIP. His academic background includes a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacology from the University College Dublin in Ireland. He has a Bachelor of Pharmacy from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and a postgraduate diploma from Stellenbosch University. He got his PhD from the same university at Stellenbosch University. He was recognized as the South African Pharmacy Council's National Pharmacist of the Year in 2008 and Community Pharmacist of the Year in 2019. He served as an elected member on the South African Pharmacy Council from 2013 to 2018. And I, with that, would like to welcome Sham to start his presentation. Lovely to have you, Sham. We are delighted to have you, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dalia. Can you hear me loud and clear?
I can hear you very well, thanks, Sham.
Great. So it's a real pleasure to be part of this digital event today. Thanks to FIP for the invitation. A really warm African greeting from the Independent Community Pharmacy Association and the Pharmaceutical Society of South Africa. So let me move on to my next slide, which you can change that for me. Yeah, you're there. So this highlights the three elements that form the fundamental categories of Goal 14, being workforce, practice, and science. It deals with quality training, information and advice, and science-based medicine information. Within these three elements, Dalia just presented the various mechanisms that's available. It's almost like a menu of services that countries could choose from, either utilizing the entire menu of what works for you. Next. Next, Dalia, thank you. So it is widely accepted that pharmacists are the medicine experts. This comes from an undergraduate 4-year B.Pharm degree, which most countries have, or the 6-year D.Pharm that some countries have instituted. Together with this, you're expected to maintain your license in practice through CPD requirements. There's advanced certification and training. For example, the recent COVID vaccine program, where you put in tools that help you better manage your patients. And many countries have created areas of specialization, such as diabetes, asthma, oncology, HIV, for example. So in my next slide, I'm going to look at the core competence. And this has been suggested by the American College of Clinical Pharmacy and relates to 6 areas. The first being direct patient care, medication management, systems-based managed systems-based management and population health, communication, professionalism, and CPD. Next. So how is this expertise applied in a practice setting? Pharmacists are expected to conduct reviews, counsel patients, and rationalize and manage their medicine program. So if we move to the next slide. So from a practice tool point of view, direct patient care involves observing the patient's needs, collaborating with other practitioners, customizing individual therapies, and monitoring ongoing patient responses. Countries are focusing on tools such as medicine therapy management, new medicine services, deprescribing, and medicine reconciliation before and after admission into a hospital setting. Next slide. So further, pharmacists have become an excellent resource for information on health devices, electronic point of care testing equipment, and health apps. Chronic care management and pharmacist-initiated therapy is a large part of our practice. Health and wellness in the form of pharmacy clinics, for example, or population interventions like we are doing currently with COVID, have become a hallmark of the excellent services that's provided by pharmacists. Next slide. So Epler and Strand suggested a one patient at a time approach, and I like this approach. And this is to help establish a therapeutic relationship with your patient. And that is key to us advancing both pharmacy and Goal 14. Various strategies have been built in to include, for example, this one that South Africa uses by Prof. Sherak and Kraus. The program includes an assessment, a patient care plan, and an evaluation. Next. So this system approach ensures a comprehensive medication management and forms the core of the goal of medicine expertise. It ensures you don't miss anything in your assessment, especially if patients are using, for example, a lot happens in Africa, traditional medicines, vitamins, or other medication that might be prescribed by the pharmacist. To ensure that we take all of this into consideration before making any final decision, this systems approach works best. Next. So it is critical that we go even further to contribute to the culture of quality improvement, ensure transparency, allow patients to access their own information, where they take ownership and manage their own health, especially around the self-care concepts that have been promoted by FIP at the moment. We do need to ensure that we measure pharmacy's impact on the broader healthcare priorities in any country. And South Africa has a number of priorities, and we've taken special cognizance of it. Pharmacy is developing streams that work in line with the National Department of Health. Next. So there's been multiple discussions on patient health records. So outside of this set of records that pharmacy should be capturing on a day-to-day basis, it is imperative that we escalate the focus to being allowed to access patient records, especially with patient consent, of course, and be able to input data into the record system that might be a finding within a pharmacy, whether it's a clinical finding, whether it is point of care testing that you might be doing, or you might want to add medication in from a pharmacy-initiated therapy. It must allow us to interact with the platform and input this data, so we have a universal picture of what a patient's full medication history looks like. Next slide. So the science element of this developmental goal focuses on our role on clinical research, manufacturing processes, and designing essential medicine protocols for the country. The one FIP concept ensures that we exercise our expertise across the medicine chain in total. Next. So even in our pharmaceutical care function, our science must guide the design and implementation of therapeutic drug monitoring. Any adverse events must be governed by the scientific principles, clinical measures, provision on drug information and monitoring usage. So as a practicing pharmacist, what I find in many countries, and including ourselves, that groundbreaking practices that happen in a community pharmacy, for example, go unnoticed, they're not measured, and they are never reported. So I think we need our scientific environment to come into the practice model and try to assist us to better highlight these best practice models. Next slide. So preparing for the next decade will require us to combine medicine expertise with the essential elements of the concept of impact and outcomes as defined in goal number 11. Understanding outcomes presents a unique opportunity for pharmacists to redefine their medicine expertise, facilitate collaboration, and understand the impact that each of our modalities that we apply on the quality of life of our patients. Next. So to illustrate this success story that has already been around for quite a while, I chose a few international studies that demonstrate the value of the pharmacist in medicine expertise. Next slide. So the first of this is the Asheville Diabetes Project, which is a 5-year study that showed substantial cost reduction of almost $2,500 per patient per year, with a 50% sick leave reduction for the city of Asheville. This target was the local municipal workers. The intervention was really a patient-centered diabetes model with a care plan and a follow-up. So the idea of putting together programs that takes the science, takes the practice, and merges that into producing our patient outcomes. Next slide. So the Asthma Project, where pharmacists served as case managers, reviewing a care plan, conducting medication assessments for example, SAVA overuse, and teaching inhaler technique. So asthma control was sustained over a period of this 5 years at a goal of 90% of outcomes. The second graph in the bottom illustrates the substantial decrease in ER and hospital events that these patients might have ended up with if it wasn't for the pharmacist intervention. So we've adopted this kind of strategic approach in our projects in South Africa, one of them being the Kamba Yashanga project. And this is it's a project that we have escalated to 3 FIP African countries as a pilot. Next program. So both the 10-city challenge and the Minnesota study further illustrates the advantage of our medicine expertise applied in a patient outcome situation. So these orange blocks that you see on the left shows the patient getting to goal in multiple chronic conditions, for example, diabetes, lipid control, and hypertension. Further, while making better decisions on attending to eye examinations, for example, in diabetes, foot examinations, and further taking a flu vaccine. And you know how important all of these are in managing these patients strategically. So all of this is illustrated in the orange blocks that you see. Next slide. So Ross Sayuki, a very esteemed member of FIP, in his studies indicated that pharmacists can reduce people's cardiovascular risk by around 21%. So Ross is professor of medicine and director of epidemiology at the University of Alberta in Canada. And some of his papers are showing the advantage of practice models. And I think you need to maybe follow Prof. Suyuki in his tweets so you can get hold of some of these excellent papers. Next slide, which is my last. So in conclusion, the future of medicine expertise requires us to design quality measures and measurement systems, ensure we get harmonization across FIP member countries, of course, with room for specific local needs. The focus being patient-centered and a measure of quality of life. It must be simple to use and easy to replicate across the world, and must take into account risk adjustment across healthcare providers. In other words, we all must be setting the same targets, whether the GP, the general practice is seeing the patient or a pharmacy is seeing the patient. And we need to make sure that it is entrenched in a universal data platform. It might be localized, but we must be able to pull data internationally so pharmacy can show its value. And of course, this must be encompassed in a payment system that is fair and equitable. And star performances, now we kind of measure pharmacists by the number of prescriptions you do or the number of items that go through the system. But I think the star performances must largely be driven by patient outcome rather than product refill. Thank you. My last slide. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present, and I will wait for the question and answer session. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sham, for that really interesting presentation. And what I really enjoyed, and I'm sure that our attendees would agree, is the fact that you've given a really good overview of the integration between practice, science, workforce, and the importance of data-driven evidence to support the development of medicine expertise in our profession. Thank you so much for that. It also now gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker for today. And it's our colleague, Dr. Josep Guiu from Spain. Dr. Josep is the Director of Pharmacy and Medicines at the Consortium of Health and Social Care of Catalonia and adjunct lecturer of clinical pharmacy and pharmacotherapy at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Food Sciences of the University of Barcelona, Spain. He is currently the Secretary of the Catalan Society of Clinical Pharmacy and Vice President of the European region of the Hospital Pharmacy section at FIP. Welcome to the call, Josep. Lovely to have you, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Dalia, for your kind words, and thank you also to FIP from the ICANN invitation to be here today to share the perspectives of the hospital pharmacists in the medicines expertise. The title of my brief presentation is Advancing the Future Hospital Pharmacy Practice Model and the Value of Basal Statements. Basal statements as a tool that was developed by the hospital pharmacy section in FIP. The FIP basal statements were elaborated in 2008 during a global conference on the future of hospital pharmacy, which took place in Basel in Switzerland, prior to the 68th World Congress of FIP. Some years later, the FIP statements were revisited in Bangkok, and now we have a updated version of them. You can access to these statements, to the revisited version of the basal statements in the FIP website. You have here the link, no login, no password required to access to the statements. The statements are divided in different topics: administration, monitoring use of medicines, human resources, preparation and delivery, information on prescribing, procurement, and operating statements. And also you can have access to the literature published related to the basal statements. All these statements are also linked and mapped to the FIP development goals, and medicines expertise, one of the development goal, which is linked to the basal statements. They have been linked and mapped by the research committee of the hospital pharmacy section, which is the World Hospital Pharmacy Research Consortium. And with the revisited or the updated version that we are working now on to be published probably in Brisbane, Australia in a couple of years, we'll have to update also with some of these development goals that have been taking more importance in healthcare and also with the influence of the pandemic. Which are the objectives, the basal statements? To build a shared vision among hospital pharmacists, pharmacy opinion leaders through the world. And they are not standards, but they are preferred feature of hospital pharmacy practice. So they are aspirational goals. And they serve to identify strategic goals for the global advancement of hospital pharmacy, which are relevant the issues of each participating country, so they can be adapted to each country. And they are consensus statements. So how to best prioritize the practice of hospital pharmacy and the advancements of the practice, and to offer guidance to hospital pharmacies, to healthcare authorities in different countries to develop the pharmacy practice and also the hospital pharmacy practice in their countries. So it's a roadmap for hospital pharmacies on a global level. There are 65 statements, which are divided in these 6 topics and overarching statements, and you can access them. Most of them are related to the medicines expertise, which is the 14th Sustainable Development Goal of the FIP. Moreover, with the hospital pharmacy section, we have developed a self-assessment tool, which is also available and you can access. It's a free online tool. Here you have the link as well. You only have to register to create your user. And in this online tool, there are 4 sections. You can evaluate and assess the level of implementation of the basal statements in your hospital, in your institution, and you can also use them, these results, to plan a strategic action and to make an action plan to prioritize which statements or which topics you have to work on to develop or to advance your practice level. So you can save your results and check it afterwards. But why we are revisiting or updating and making aspirational goals? Because hospital pharmacists are adapting in the hospital pharmacy, or the hospital of the future. The hospital pharmacy in the future will have to adapt as well to the new kinds of hospitals. So hospital pharmacies will be part of this building the hospital of the future. And we see that the hospital of the future will be more digital, more focused in patient experience, also implementing artificial intelligence tools. We have to focus also in operational efficiencies through technology, with robots, automatization, also to focus in the clinical part of the pharmacies, in the more expertise in the medicines. To be more integrated care beyond the hospital facilities. We see that the hospitals now, with the pandemic, maybe are very focused in the critical care patients, in acute patients, but we see that, we oversee the future of the aging population, that hospitals will have to be more adapted to their communities, and home hospitalization will be a common practice in many countries. So we have to adapt also hospital pharmacies to provide care on these new patients that will have in the future. And maybe we also have it not currently at this moment. Also, new hospitals or future hospitals will integrate new professional roles, healthcare coach, genetic counselors, more medicine or biomedical engineers, And we have also to adapt to these professional roles, also to integrate part of these roles in our profession, and to work as we are working now, being part of the multidisciplinary team that is taking the management of the medication of the patient, and also participating in the disease management of the patient. And also with the new technologies, with the innovation, with the precision medicine, the new medicines that are target medicines, and also with new kind of medicines like advanced therapy medical products, like genetic engineering, cell therapy, tissue engineering, which are now drugs and now being dispensed from pharmacies, but are very different from the traditional drugs. So we have to also to integrate the knowledge to manage these drugs, and also to provide the best and rational use of these drugs. On also changing our practice through the pandemic, we have seen that home delivery of drugs from hospitals, also providing virtual pharmaceutical care to our patients from the hospital. So we are changing also our activities, and the pandemic maybe has been a moment to change and to pass from the pilots to the implementation of clinical practice of some of these virtual pharmaceutical care provision. And as hospitals will be also more integrated in the community, hospital pharmacies have to be prepared to deliver primary health care as well. Next slide. Yeah, and to be prepared in some of these areas where the complexity of drugs is increasing over the years, we have more drugs, more complex, more precision medicine drugs. We see that hospital pharmacy specialization is a need. And also because we work in an environment of risky and expensive drugs and personalized and novel medications. The European Association of Hospital Pharmacists has promoted and this year has updated the position statement about hospital pharmacy specialization, which is a need to develop and see which areas of practice where hospital pharmacists has to specialize to provide this advanced practice performance of hospital pharmacy, and also where we need to be a medicines expert, but we also need to get advanced competencies in these areas of practice, like oncology, advanced therapies, or pediatrics. Next slide, please. But not only these ones. Advanced hospital pharmacy practice requires this set of advanced competencies, and probably we need also to get credit or accredited competencies to go above and beyond this basic education of pharmacy and to be more experts in these areas of practice. These are some of the institutions or organizations that are working in the specialization and accreditation of hospital pharmacy practice, like the Board of Pharmacy Specialties or the American Society of Pharmacists, and the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists is working with the regulation or the credit of a common training framework of hospital pharmacy through Europe. And this is some of the areas of practice where hospital pharmacies are now specialized, and probably we have to focus in the future with new areas, but critical care, oncology pharmacy, pediatrics, emergency treatment, psychiatry, artificial nutrition, and also working with advanced therapies, sterile compounding, infectious disease, ambulatory care, geriatric pharmacy with the aging population, and also with transplants, which every year we have more patients with transplantations, and we can provide pharmaceutical care to these patients, but only we have the enough competencies and the advanced competencies to focus in and to have the medicine expertise of these therapeutic areas. So how to enhance the role of hospital pharmacists as a medicine expert? We have to change the traditional role of hospital pharmacy. not only in the logistics of pharmacy in the hospital. And as Basil Stemers promote is to be part of this multidisciplinary team, to be a medicines expert in this healthcare team, and to contribute not only in the medication management, also in the disease management of these patients, to put a patient-centered care provision. You also have to be versatile in the profession, including engagement awards, which is reflected in the basal statements, because although we can be experts in a therapeutic area, we know that we have to provide the overview of as a pharmacist, as a medicines expert, but not only in one specific therapeutic area. Importance of this super specializations is now currently important in many countries and will be in more countries every year. And overall, there's a need to recognize this changing role of hospital pharmacies, and we are working with through a tool like basal statements and other statements that have been subsequented from the basal statements to implement these aspirational goals and to implement this advanced practice of hospital pharmacies. Well, but we have new challenges also, and future challenges as a hospital pharmacist. Apart from all these opportunities, one is the workforce deficiencies, capacity problems. In some countries, there's a lack of graduates and trained pharmacists, specifically in some of these advanced competences. There are many differences between competences between countries. So sometimes there is a lack of consistency in which are specialties or specializations. And there is a need to invest in a workforce to plan as a healthcare force of hospital pharmacy profession in the hospitals. We have to solidify these new roles as medicine experts in these specific therapeutic areas, and also to provide and contribute in the disease management of the patients, and also to provide data about these outcomes that can be improved with the participation of the hospital pharmacies. And thank you for your attention. I'm happy also to respond all the questions in the questionnaire session afterwards.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for this lovely overview. You provided us with the hospital perspective today, but you also highlighted the important FIP tool being the Basel statements to advancing hospital pharmacy around the world, and the fact that it could be used as a self-assessment tool for those that are interested in it. Thank you also for highlighting the area on subspecialization and the importance of that in transforming hospital pharmacy and medicine's expertise. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you, Dalia.
Pleasure. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is absent live from the call, but Dr. Hala Fadza from the United States provided us with a recording of her presentation today, because she is based in Pennsylvania, United States, and it just was going to be a little bit inconvenient to start this call at 4:30 a.m. Her time. So she was kind enough to provide us with a recording to share today. But I'd like to introduce Dr. Hala Fadza. Hala is a pharmacist with a PhD in pharmaceutics from University College London, UCL School of Pharmacy in the UK. After postdoctoral fellowships at UCL School of Pharmacy, UCL Institute of Ophthalmology and Purdue University, Hala joined Butler University College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences in the United States, where she is now an associate professor. Hala is the chair of pediatric formulations at FIP and an honorary associate professor at UCL and a member of the World Health Organization BioWaiver project. Hala co-developed Octasa, a commercialized oral colonic drug delivery formulation for ulcerative colitis. Her research works towards developing pharmaceutical, methodologies that optimize oral and ophthalmic drug product design by identifying, predicting, and mitigating variability in drug exposure. It's great to have a recording from you, Hala. We miss you, but we would also enjoy the recording from you.
Good day, everyone. This is Hala Fada, and I'm excited to be discussing today patient-centric product design for pediatrics. I'll provide a brief overview of pediatric regulatory initiatives and then discuss pediatric age-appropriate medicines, followed by oral extemporaneous liquid compounding, and finally conclude with the work we're doing at Pediatric Formulations Focus Group at FIP. So FIP strives to bridge education, science, and practice, and formulation science distinguishes our profession. As a global community of pharmacists and pharmaceutical scientists, we need to work together to ensure the safety, efficacy, acceptability, and access of pediatric medicines to different regions of the globe. So while over a third of the world's population is children under 18 years of age, there continues to be a scarcity of age-appropriate dosage forms for pediatrics. And to that end, a large number of medicines are prescribed off-label to children, to the world's children's population. So over 60% of prescribing for pediatrics takes place off-label or off license, and children are considered therapeutic orphans. And this led to the regulatory initiatives of FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the USA, European Medicines Agency, and other regulatory authorities all over the world to strive in the development of age-appropriate clinical studies. So one initiative is the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children's Act, BPCA, and this is a voluntary initiative for pharmaceutical companies. So the FDA invites pharmaceutical companies when they submit a new drug application for them to conduct clinical studies in pediatrics, to produce a pediatric investigational plan. And this provides a financial incentive. So although it's voluntary, the FDA provides a financial incentive for pharmaceutical companies, whereby there's an extra 6 months of patent exclusivity. But then there's also the FDA Pediatric Research Equity Act, PRIA, and they have been termed the carrot and the stick approach. PRIA is not voluntary, and the FDA has the authority to require pharmaceutical companies when they submit a new application for a drug to conduct pediatric clinical studies. So it's a requirement. Similar to EMA's PIP, Pediatric Investigation Plan, it's a requirement as well. But in both cases, companies may request a waiver, or whereby they can submit the results of the pediatric studies later on, not necessarily at the same time of the clinical studies in the adult population. These initiatives have been successful. In the USA, over 800 pediatric labeling updates have been approved since the passing of BPCA and PRIA. And in Europe, 238 new medicines for children and 38 new dosage forms have been approved in the European Union. However, challenges continue to remain. And so the completion rate of mandatory pediatric post-marketing studies in the USA has been 33%. Other studies are still ongoing or have not been completed. So it's taking time for pharmaceutical companies to complete these studies. And a similar scenario takes place in Europe. And that's because pediatric studies are difficult to conduct. It's difficult to recruit patients. There's limited investigator expertise in conducting pediatric clinical studies. And importantly, there's limited age-appropriate formulations. And a study by EMA, a report, showed that the development of off-patent medicinal products has not been effective. So while there's a requirement and incentives to study new medicinal products and new drugs, but there is little interest in studying medicines that are much older and off-patent. So with this, not only our medicines are prescribed off-label, but because of the limited studies, we have limited availability of appropriate child-friendly formulations. And this leads us to the acceptability of dosage forms. So EMA defines this as the overall ability and willingness of the patient and caregiver to administer the medicine as intended. And acceptability is an important part of adherence. And as we know, as pharmacists, adherence are important in achieving treatment efficacy. Now, there's different steps in the acceptability. So some patients may not even initiate their treatment. Maybe the treatment looks unacceptable or it's difficult to swallow. Patients may not persist in their treatment. They may miss doses or take their doses at a long time if the dosage regimen is not user-friendly. And some patients may even discontinue the treatment. And one of those reasons could be cost of the medicine. So when addressing acceptability, we need to address initiation, implementation, and continuation of treatment. And patient-centric product design. So as pharmacists and pharmaceutical scientists, we always think about the physicochemical properties of the drug. We always think about the therapeutic window and efficacy and safety of the drug. We think of the disease state of our patient population and if clearance is going to be impaired because of hepatic impairment or reduced renal clearance. But we need to think of our patient characteristics, and that's patient-centric drug product design, whereby the needs of our specific patient population are the focal points when we're designing our formulation and overall product. So age is a very important factor. We need to think, does our patient have visual impairments? So while smaller tablets for adults are easier to swallow, but for the elderly, if they're too small, and elderly, if they have vision impairment, if they have diabetic macular degeneration, then they may not be able to see the tablets. Or if they have rheumatoid arthritis, if the tablet is so small, it may fall and they may not be able to pick it up well. We need to think of polypharmacy and if patients are on other medicines as well. And we need to think of socioeconomics and the cost of the medication. So specifically to pediatrics, we need to consider the swallowability of the dosage form. Can it be swallowed? Can it be handled? Is it easy to administer by the caregiver? Is it acceptable, palatable? Does it have the right organoleptic properties? So does it look good? Does it smell good? Does it taste just fine? And that's important in adherence. We need to think of the safety of our excipients. And we've seen that in some liquid preparations, safety levels of excipient levels exceeds the safety limits. We need to think of the stability of our medicines, specifically under high humidity or high temperatures, and specifically pertaining to liquid dosage forms. Packaging of our medicine. Does it take a big space? Is it a low footprint? So liquids, they can take quite a large space, and glass bottles may be implicated as well. So we need to think of all those factors when we're thinking of our specific patient populations and the regions of the world our children may be in. Also, we need to think of the dosage regimen. So if a medicine needs to be taken multiple times a day, then having it as a sustained release is definitely much easier for children, so they don't have to take their medicines at school. So we have the oraldispersible tablets, which disintegrate in the mouth, either just with the saliva in the mouth or with a sip of liquid. And these are picking up interest because they're stable. Compared to liquids, they're more stable. We don't need to include preservatives in the formulations because they're solids. And we have the 3D printed oraldispersible tablets, which was approved by the FDA a few years ago, levetiracetam for epilepsy. And the nice thing about this tablet, it's a large dose. It's 1 gram of levetiracetam, and 1 gram is too big to swallow for a child. But because it's ODTs, it's perfectly acceptable, and 3D printing allows it to be created into a porous tablet. So there's lots of pores in the tablet, and it quickly disintegrates on contact with a small sip of water. So this was made by binder jetting, whereby essentially you're applying powder onto the surface and you're rolling out the powder, and then you're using your 3D printer nozzle, you're spraying the binder liquid, and the binder liquids helps hold the particles of the powder together. And you're constructing your tablet layer by layer using computer software that helps design the tablet configurations. Will we one day have 3D printers in our pharmacy? If we do, it's likely going to be the fused deposition, melt extrusion 3D printings, whereby we have the polymer and the drug and they're melted together, and then they're extruded and sprayed onto the surface. So can it be used for personalized medicines in our pharmacy for designing tablets of specific dose strength, of specific configuration? Will we get the filaments, the polymers, and the drug shipped from pharmaceutical companies? So we're not reinventing the wheel and starting the formulation from scratch. And what we're doing at the pharmacy is spraying the right dose and based on our software programming. Well, we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen in a few years' time. Multi-particulates are also of interest. These are small and multiple unit dosage forms. They can be granules, beads, pellets, and up to from 50 micrometers, so tiny, up to 2 millimeters in diameter. And again, these are solids, they're stable. The nice thing about these is they can be filled into a capsule and sprinkled onto soft food, to milk, to water, to make it easier and more amenable for swallowing by our children. This is a product that's undergoing FDA approval or FDA review, and it's a 4-in-1 dose, fixed dose combination of protease inhibitors and nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors for HIV. So unlike the existing products on the market, ritonavir, which has a bitter taste, a high ethanol content, limited shelf life, these are more stable. You have 4 drugs combined into 1 dose, and they don't need to be stored in the refrigerator. So shipping and storage becomes much easier. And we have the more advanced multiparticulates, which provide extended release, so release over 24 hours. So methylphenidate for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's biphasic release, this particular formulation of Quilichew. So the patient can chew the tablet, it's made up of resins, and these resins have extended release properties. They won't be destroyed by chewing, and you get biphasic release. So an immediate release profile followed by a sustained release profile, and then the drug levels fall in the evening to avoid the side effects of the medicine, such as insomnia. And so these are amber light resins, and your drug is ionically bound to the resin, and there's also a coating around the resins, and drug release occurs by an ion exchange process with sodium ions in our gut. Extemporaneous, now moving on to extemporaneous compounding, which we've all been trained in at some point in our pharmacy school. And extemporaneous compounding continues to play a very important role, a critical role in pediatric oral preparations when commercial products are not available. So commercial products are not available for many pediatric medicines because, as we've seen at the beginning, a lot of pediatric medicines are prescribed off-label, and some of them may be very expensive and not available in certain regions of the world. So extemporaneous compounding, we can crush our tablets and formulate those into a liquid. And this needs to be supported because there's so many different ways we can do this. And the methodology and the formulations we use need to be consistent and safe. And a study by the World Health Organization showed that there's a poor availability of key essential medicines for children in Central African countries. And this was a study in capital cities in Central African countries, and about 50% of the essential medicines were not available in age-appropriate dosage forms. So this is where our role as pharmacists and formulation scientists becomes imperative. We need to standardize extemporaneous compounding practices. Studies have shown that excipient levels in some products exceed the recommended exposure limits, especially in children who are taking multiple medicines at the same time. So, for example, ethanol levels may be high, and we know of the neurotoxicity associated with ethanol and the drug interactions. Propylene glycols levels can be very high, and the hypoosmolarity associated with that. Parabens, the toxicity of parabens and other preservatives. We include a large amount of sucrose as well as in our preparations, and we need to be careful with sucrose if our children have type 1 diabetes. And not only does the safety of excipients need to be taken into consideration, but also we need to be cognizant of the fact that there's a large variability in compounding practices. Europe shows lack of consistency in compounding practices. There's inconsistencies as well within certain states. In the USA, there's consistency so within regions and between regions. Therefore, we need to have formulations that have been studied, that have been verified, stability has been proven, and that can be easily translated to different parts of the world. So this brings me to the work of our pediatric formulations focus group at FIP. And our vision is to make age-appropriate medicines acceptable and available to all children around the world. To have standardized pediatric formulation recipes for oral liquids that can be translated to different regions. They are simple, they're safe, they're robust, they're reproducible. So that's our mission: global harmonization of oral extemporaneous pediatric preparation practices and research into affordable age-appropriate medicines. So acceptability, cost, and access is an important part of acceptability of our medicines. And for this to be achieved, it needs to be a global and coordinated effort to address the challenges we are facing in pediatric medicines. Please visit our PFFG website. The link is below. And our specific goals: to identify preparations that are robust, feasible, safe, palatable, and stable. Develop best strategies for extemporaneous compounding and provide training. We want to launch a platform for exchange of ideas and initiatives. And we want to continue the research process in age-appropriate medicines. Part of our work is to understand the challenges different regions are facing, and we do need your help. Please complete this survey, which is on Pediatric Formulations Focus Group website. The PFFG group can be accessed through the Drug Delivery Manufacturing Special Interest Group. You may scan this QR code to access the survey, because this is really a global effort. We need to understand what challenges you are facing, what the needs are, what can we do to improve oral extemporaneous compounding practices as part of our work. And the survey is available in 9 different languages, so you may select your preferred languages when completing the survey. Please distribute it to your networks, to your pharmacy organizations, to your pharmacy communities. Like I said, we can only make progress by working together on this initiative. I'd like to acknowledge our Pediatric Formulations Focus Group at FIP, Dr. Maria Carvola, which has been instrumental in this initiative, and she's our community pharmacy representative on PFFG. So thank you all for your efforts, and thank you for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. I can be reached at the email below. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hala. That was a really interesting and informative presentation. Thank you for the effort that you have invested into providing us with this really, really interesting perspective. You have added and enriched the program by providing the pharmaceutical science perspective on enhancing medicine's expertise within our profession. I would like to take the opportunity now for about 5 or so minutes and invite my fellow speakers to perhaps come on camera and see if we can address some of any of the questions that our attendees have provided us before we proceed to the next segment of the session, which invites our colleague Chris John for the Indicators Project. So I'll stop sharing my screen for about 5 minutes or so. Okay, so we can see each other. And just having a look at some of the questions that have been provided to us. I've got one question that I would like to pose to perhaps Joseph, because you spoke about the Basel statements, Joseph, and was very curious to learn about your experience on the Basel statements to identify areas of improvement in your own pharmacy practice arena. Could you provide us with some insight?
Thank you, Dalia. Well, from the hospital pharmacy section perspective, we have initiated some experiences and initiatives to assess the hospital pharmacy practice. So some countries. One is Namibia. We have published the result of a Namibia survey about the hospital pharmacy practice in that country, and how the healthcare authorities that want to advance in the hospital pharmacy practice in that country want to implement some improvements also at the graduate students at the universities to get better training for pharmacists that afterwards they will go to the hospital pharmacies. And another project also that is currently ongoing is in Pakistan. Has been which will be published hopefully in the next years, and we also have the experience of individual hospital pharmacies. And for example, it's difficult to get 100% of accomplishment of all these aspirational goals, but you can focus in some of these goals, and that is you really know that you have to work on to advance your practice, and maybe you will not get all of them, but for example, in the perspective of expertise, the medicine expertise, to get the training resources to your personnel, and to have more advanced competence, to be more integrated in the healthcare teams, and to demonstrate that pharmacists can contribute in the outcomes of the patients, but with advanced practice. So one of the best improvements is that you can improve in your pharmacy, but also you can improve in your practice and in the outcomes of your patients.
Thank you, Joseph. So you highlight the importance of making sure that we start with improving the education and the training linked to competencies, and hence that leads on to obviously improving practice and patient outcomes, which I think in a way also ties in quite nicely with Sham's presentation, where he really gave an overview of the importance of data on impact. And I'm just wondering, Sham, perhaps if you could provide our attendees at this point in time, in your opinion, how important is data and evidence to advancing patient outcomes, and particularly in medicine's expertise for this particular development goal?
Thanks for that. I think there's two streams that we need to think about. One is from a patient care point of view, and I think it's critical that we continue to accumulate the level of data that's required so that we could make the correct interventions and ensure an outcome for a patient. Without that kind of data and without it being healthcare professional facing, in other words, at your computer when you need it, those kinds of decision-making are not conducive to what we're doing at the moment. I think the second issue from a advancing of pharmaceutical services in most countries, what we do require is accumulating this data so that we can show the level of evidence we require to convince governments and other players, insurers, for example, payers of medical aid schemes, for example, that we play a significant role. And every time you walk into a room where you are trying to advance pharmacy, they want to see the data. So from a pharmacy point of view, we require the data. So I think those are the two streams that are critical to data analysis. Thank you.
Dr. Sham, thanks for your insight. Really appreciated. And this really leads us to the next segment, as we don't have any more questions from our audience, to learn more about the Indicators project at FIP that is led by my colleague, Chris John. And I would like to pass on the mic to you, Chris, and thank our speakers for answering those questions. So I will start sharing slides again, Chris, for you. And please do let me know if you're seeing them appropriately. So we'll go off camera now, colleagues.
Thanks, Dalia, and hello, everyone. This section is about monitoring and evaluating Development Goal 14 medicines expertise. Next slide, please. You've heard from our speakers today the importance of data, and for data to provide us with evidence, and for evidence to provide us with intelligence. The key work engine for FIP around data collection is the Global Pharmaceutical Observatory, and its mission centers around data intelligence, advocacy and reporting. But our first task is always to collate that global data on workforce, education, practice, and pharmaceutical science. And we must undertake comprehensive analyses of collated data to provide accessible, high quality intelligence. And all this must be communicated innovatively to promote our member organizations' impact on health. This communication will often be via the FIP Atlas, which is our visualization platform for displaying our intelligence across the globe. Finally, we will provide evidence-based strategic information reports and guidance on the application of pharmaceutical science, policies, practices, and services. Next slide, please. You'll see on this slide, we have some of the FIP Global Pharmaceutical Observatory outputs and inferences. I won't go through all of these, but I would say the reason we're here today is, if you look at the last bullet, and the key output influence is about supporting health systems strengthening by tracking progress against development goals. And from today's perspective, that's development goal around medicines expertise. Next slide, please. Here are some of the current GPO actions and projects. Again, and for the reason we're here today is we have an important project that you'll see at the bottom of the slide that aims to produce indicators that will measure and monitor progress towards the development goals, which is where you all come in. Next slide, please. So FIP is now seeking to develop indicators and country level metrics to measure and monitor progress and the performance of the implementation of the FIP development goals via the FIP Global Pharmaceutical Observatory. So during this event, we would like to seek your support for this global indicators and metrics project by contributing to this brief activity linked to the current FIP digital event you have joined. So we'd like to know your opinions about this development goal 14 and how it can be monitored and measured. You'll also receive an email to complete this activity after the end of this event if you don't complete it during the event. But we'd be very pleased if you're able to take part in the activity right now, as you still have a few minutes left in the event. So you can do this by scanning the QR code or clicking on the link in the slide. And we would be very grateful for your help and expertise. It doesn't take long, a few minutes activity, and it will really help us develop these indicators and metrics to measure and monitor progress with the implementation of Development Goal 14 medicines expertise. I'll also put a link in the chat box, which you can click on for the activity. And thank you so much for taking part. And back to Dalia.
Thank you so much, Chris. I would like to encourage our attendees on the call to participate in this very important piece of work via the link provided in the chat box, and you are welcome to do that today or at another time at your leisure. Dear colleagues, it has been an absolute pleasure for me to moderate this very insightful webinar. But before we conclude, I would like to also invite you to consider registering and attending the final episode in this series, episode number 21, which will deliver the FIP development goal number 11 on impact and outcomes, which our colleague Sham touched on very nicely during his presentation. It will be held on the 15th of December. We do invite you to register and attend it. You are able to register for this on our website via events.fip.org. And also to remind you that all of FIP digital events recordings are available on the same page, and any future events will also be available on the same page for you to access, to register and attend. FIP offers various digital events on a wide range of topics, including antimicrobial resistance, non-communicable diseases, vaccination, the FIP development goals, as today's episode highlighted, patient safety, prevention, and many, many more. So to see all of our upcoming events, and perhaps some have already been advertised for 2022, do visit our website via the link provided to you. I would like to sincerely thank our speakers for today's session, and if I could invite Joseph and Sham just to put their videos on so we can just wave them goodbye and thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure having you both. Thank you for your support of the profession and your support to the Federation. It's been lovely having you. You have really enriched the program today. Our dear colleagues on the call, you're more than welcome to also provide us with some feedback via webinars@frp.org. And we hope to continue to improve and support the profession via our digital events offerings. Thank you again for being with us, and good day to you all. Wishing you a happy and safe holiday season, and happy 2022, everyone. Goodbye for now. Thank you so much.